G'day legends, I hope you're all awesome. This is the Amperium Live from St. Roch coming out of Ukraine. It is an amp modeler that supports component-based amp models as well as neural network-based captures. There are a bunch of built-in effects in here. It's got an effects loop. There are XLR outputs on there as well. There's a headphone jack, there's a USB connection, and it has built-in Bluetooth as well. There is an onboard screen and some editing that can be done on here, but I think the most effective way to use this is to use either the software editor or the mobile app that lets you edit it. The general idea being that you can load in captures or dial in your amp models, kind of tweak them to your heart's content, bump them into this, and use this as an all-in-one gigging solution. You can see there's 4 built-in foot switches as well. So let's just dive straight in. I've got the Amperium hooked up to the software editor at the moment. I'm using a USB cable to make this connection. You can use Bluetooth, and there is a software editor that works on mobile devices as well. It is worth wrapping our head around the way this whole thing works in here. So you've got a preamp section here for your preamp models, and if you go through them, there's over 100 of them. So you've got a Bassman, you've got a JTM 45, there's Engels, there's Bogners, there's Friedmans, there's Marshalls, there's Boogies, there's everything you would kind of expect in here. I'm gonna start with this JCM 800, but then most preamp models will have a bunch of options on there. For example, this JCM 800 lets you select between a stock 800, the Kerry King 800, a high gain mod, a Bogner mod, and a Rat mod. Stuff like the Mark series models will have buttons which represent the push-pull pots on a Mark series amp as well. So even though there's over 100 preamp models, in reality you have way more options than that. Then you've got a separate power amp section. So if you select something like the JCM 800, you can set the default power amp to match it, or you can come to the power amp section and you can select between different power amp designs. You can select different power amp tubes to go in there and different types of loads in here. So the stock one's using the St. Roch reactor, but you've got a whole bunch of different impedance curves modeled in here as well. So you could just use the stock amp models in there, or you could kind of bake your own in here, which is a pretty cool feature. Furthermore, you can also load up their neural network models in here, so kind of like a Tonex style thing. I'll show you some of those, but you will notice over here, you've got the neural network option on here, so you can massively expand this preamp section in here. This is all really cool. It doesn't really mean much if it doesn't sound good, so let's just hear the stock 800. That already sounds really, really good. I should have mentioned that I'm using my free cab IR that you can get in the video description. You can set the quality from 61 milliseconds up to 177 milliseconds. And one thing with using impulse responses of different lengths is that, you know, you get kind of more low-end information on the longer length IRs and maybe a bit of room sound. So you can kind of fine-tune the response in there. I found like 107 milliseconds works really nicely with my IR there. So, you know, we could go in and say use the high gain mod on here and then change the power tubes to something else. Let's just hear the high gain mod. I kind of liked the stock mode a little bit more than that. Let's roll with that. I can also change the preamp tubes in here, and there's a massive selection in there. So the component-based modeling aspect of this is very, very thorough and very customizable. I guess if you don't like having that many options and you get scared of option paralysis, then the neural network thing is going to be for you. It's just kind of like using Tonex style captures. So I'll let you hear a capture that I made of my Boogie Mark IV. That is really, really satisfying in there. You'll notice that I've got this effects 1 block in here, which I'm using as a gate. You can set it to either be a gate or a compressor. There is a master section in here with a built-in limiter, which is kind of handy. That's a nice feature in there if you want to avoid clipping the output. There's also a master EQ in here as well, and you can kind of select different bands in there. You can select different types for the bands, and you can even have a low cut and a high cut in there. I feel like for this, I just rather have a separate section that lets you adjust the high cut and low cut in the cab block, like most modelers in there, but that is a handy feature in there. Then we can get into various effects in here. So you do have a bunch of drives. Not a massive list. There's a Super Overdrive, a Tube Screamer, a Rat, MD Plus, and DoD 250. So not much compared to a lot of the other modeling options out there, but I really like the delay section in here because while the layout is a bit clunky and I think it could be cleaned up, you've got a lot of great options in here. So I really like the dual delay, but you've got a single, a reverse, a quad tap, and a multi-effects delay in here. Just let you hear the settings that I've got dialed in here, and I might even kick on the boost once I get going. Nice and greasy, which is what I like. I've moved over to another preset using the Fender Deluxe model. I've got a bit of reverb on there. I'll bypass that and then kick it in. But what is nice is you can kind of go in and tweak the reverbs in here. There's multiple modes. You've got vintage, chorus reverb. There's a delay reverb setting in there, which kind of does non-linear reverbs, and a fixed reverb and some more multi-effects options in there. Within that, you can tweak the kind of bass algorithm in there. You can set the LFO for the modulation. You can have tails on bypass on or off, or you can just go to a bunch of the presets in here. For example, I might just start off with small hall number 1, but we'll hear the Fender Deluxe just to get started. Quite fond of this plate mid for a little subtle reverb in there. We could throw that compressor up front if we wanted to and play around with a few different things. There's a knee option in there. There's no presets like, say, the reverb has. I think it could benefit from some of those. I'll let you hear that, then I'll kick in a drive, and then this effects 2 section lets us have a phaser, a chorus flanger, or vibrato, and alternatively another compressor. So you could stack compressors in here, which is kind of cool. Let's just hear this main compressor to get started with the Deluxe. some solid options in there with the modulation section. I think those presets are voiced really nicely. I particularly like that Phase 90 style sound in there. We will get to my favorite chorus mode in just a second. I've just changed over to a preset using the Vox model. This is something that I actually really like about this unit, because you bring up the Vox model and in here you can set the mode to either be brilliant or normal, like the real amp. You've got a high or a low input, but then over here you can select between an AC50, an AC30 and an AC15. You can then pair that up with different power amp choices in here as well. So rather than have, a separate model for the AC30 high and the AC30 low and the AC30 normal brilliant with all those options, I like that it's just baked in here. Like, I want some kind of Vox, I can easily compare them, and I will compare them for you in a second. So just going for a kind of chimey, rootsy thing here, let's have a listen to the difference between the AC50 and AC30 model. You can hear that those options that I tweaked in the preamp, the power amp, and the load section vary from kind of subtle, like the preamp models. I could definitely hear the difference between the AC50 and the AC30, to subtle with the load. That's more of a feel thing. It kind of changes the way it reacts under the fingers. And then obviously the power tube section, there were some massive changes in there. So I like that you can sort of take a Vox style model, add 6L6 tubes to it, try a different power section with it, and totally customize it. And like I said earlier, if that's not for you, just use the neural network models in there, and you've got a snapshot like a Kemper Quad Cortex or the Tone X thing in there. Right, I think my favorite effect in here is in the mod section. We go into the basic section for it, and the preset is just a Dimension 2. So like a Dimension style chorus, you can kind of pair this up on your clean sounds with a little bit of delay, which I might do over here. Let's pair it up with, say, just a single delay on there. I'll go 300 milliseconds. There is a ducking option in here that you can dial in, so I'll add a bit of ducking. There's modulation in there. I really like you've got different LFO options for the modulation in there, so you can get that kind of super wide thing. Let's just hear the Dimension chorus on its own, and then I'll bring some echo in. features that I wish Tone X had. The ability to have even just a basic delay in there is so handy in a kind of device that it's designed where you dial it in. You know, you either bring in your neural network models, your snapshots of your amps, or you use the built-in modeling. But then you just want a few basic effects. You want to chuck this on the floor and throw it in your guitar bag as either a backup, use it as your main gigging thing when you go direct, do the thing where you run direct on one channel and to a power amp and cab on the other. It lets you do all of those. And those effects are really, really useful. Like if I take that Mark IV preset that I showed you before and chuck this modulation on, again, the Dimension Chorus, and then I can boost it with a drive. I can hit it with some delay. I've got a phaser in there as well if I want it. It's pretty rad. I could do a gig with just this box, and I can't say that about Tone X. While I like the way the Tone X sounds, it can't do everything that this box does. A few other things that I really like on here, there are some out-of-the-box amp models in here, like the Laney GH100L. The Nightmare model, which I'm assuming is based on the Driftwood Purple Nightmare, an amp I've wanted to try for a long time, is pretty sick as well. I've also got a bunch of neural network captured amps in here, like the JVM. I've got my JTM 45, my Mark series, like you heard before, my Synergy 800 module, which I really like. One thing that I have noticed is that the neural network models kind of have this like enhanced low end thing going on, not so much from a tonal perspective, but they have this nice kind of ka-chunk about them when you play them compared to the standard amp models in there. So I'll let you hear the JVM and then maybe the JTM 45. The good things about this unit is that I think it sounds fantastic. The combination of component level amp modeling and neural captures in there is basically the best of both worlds, and I don't think either one suffers because of the other. The capture process sounds really good on there. I would say probably comparable to Tone X in there, which is definitely a great thing. And then the actual amp models in there sound fantastic as well. I do really like the level of customization in there. I don't think that many people as a percentage of the user base are really going to get too into that, but it's nice to have it there. It kind of reminds me of the fractal stuff where you can go in and change the impedance curves and change up the power amp and mix and match preamps and power amps. If you're an amp nerd like I am, that is manna from heaven. The edge that this has over something like Tone X is definitely the effect selection. It's nowhere near as diverse or comprehensive as what Line 6 or Fractal offer on there. They are companies that have decades of development behind them after all. It's probably not as comprehensive as even the Quad Cortex, which is something that I criticized in my review video with it for not being as comprehensive as some of the others, and it still has a lot of catching up to go in my opinion, but this is like a quarter of the price of something like a Quad Cortex. So the fact that it's got the captures in there, it's got some really useful effects in there, it sounds good and it feels good. They're massive, massive words of encouragement that I can offer up there. And I say words of encouragement because there are some real downsides to this and some clunk when you're using the app. I think the big thing for a lot of people is that, you know, the actual on-unit interface over here, I would almost rather this just not have this screen on here. I found it very difficult to use, super small, so you really got to bend down and look at it. The foot switches on there feel really solid. The build quality is really solid, but if this was just a black box on there and you needed to hook it up to a computer, I almost feel like it would be better off, because looking at that screen compared to just about everything else out there, I think is going to frustrate some people. And I get that hardware is hard to make, but this is competing, you know, at a price point with other things like the HX Stomp and Tone X, like I said before. Not that I think Tone X has an amazing onboard UI, but the HX Stomp would be a comparison there. And again, different feature set because that can't load captures. But when you've used something like that and you use something like this, I can understand why people would be put off by that. The other big criticism is there's no way to adjust the output volume on the front. And that really, really annoys me. You've got these two control switches on here, but what I found is a lot of the presets and a lot of the models are really hot at their default values, and I want to turn them down, but I've got to use the software to do that. I can't do it on hardware. So that is a big criticism that I have of the hardware. There's also, you know, some intermittent bugs that I have run into with the software and just the layout. Like if you look at the delay, for example, I look at that and it's not immediately obvious in any way what I'm looking at. I kind of have to go, okay, well, delay left. Okay, I can dial that in. Delay right, I can dial that in. HP, is that a high pass filter? Probably. How does it work? Is it when I turn it up? So I've got to do a lot of experimenting with that. And I think some visual aids in there, like, you know, for say the delay EQ for the feedback path, put a little diagram of a parametric style EQ in there. Let me see what's going on. This has so many great features and I love the way that it sounds in there. You know, the fact that delays have all these different modes. You've got a quad tap delay and you can set the mode on here to be ping pong, normal, or cross feedback. I love that when you select like a JCM 800 amp model, like I did before up here, that, you know, you go in and you've got these different modes. I love that if you go to something like a Mark series model, rather than have a long list of models that are modeled with, say, a switch pushed in and a switch pushed out, you just got a stock model. You can turn the bright on or off, the treble shift, the bass shift, the bright lead, the deep on or off. You can play around with the power amp. I love all that kind of stuff. I feel like it just needs more of a push and more development in terms of the way the software is laid out. I would love to see a hardware unit or some kind of firmware update that lets you use, say, the control encoder on here to adjust the output volume. That would be so handy in there. And the organization into banks and scenes is a little bit clunky in my opinion as well. Like, you know, I've got a preset here. If I click on B over here, well, is this a new preset or is this a scene within the preset? Because everything's turned off. I've got nothing in there. If I go to A, it's got my preamp and power amp dialed in, but these map to the foot switches. So, you know, if I dial in, say, preset 8A and there's scenes, I expect scenes to work that, oh, cool, I'm going to save one that's, say, just the amp and cab, or the preamp, power amp, and cab, and the next one's going to have a delay turned on, and the next one's going to have a chorus and a boost on, that kind of thing. Arranging it like that, you have to kind of go back in and you've either got to copy things over or you've got to come in here and redial it all in, which I've found pretty frustrating on there. So there's some clunk with the software in there. This is by no means perfect, but the upside to this is so strong. I really, really like this unit. I like that depth that it gives you. It doesn't treat you like an absolute dummy. Kind of says, hey, you're a guitar player, you have a set of ears, go and dial this in. I don't think it's going to be for everybody with the UI restrictions on there, but kind of like I said earlier, I could take this unit and very happily do a gig with it. It sounds fantastic. It feels really, really solid. And I'm sure there's going to be more updates to this, because in the time that I've had this unit, which is a few months now, I've spent quite a bit of time with it, there have been pretty consistent updates and improvements. It has definitely got better since I got it. And again, the effects selection in there has so much potential. I think it just kind of needs to be reorganized, and it just kind of feels a little bit like it's, this UI has been designed by an engineer, not somebody who's actually using the software. So I feel like if Saint Rock sort that aspect of it out, this can be a real power player, and it does stuff that the Quad Cortex does at a much lower price point. It does stuff that Tone X does, plus a whole bunch more things. It does stuff like the component-based modeling and the neural network-based stuff that Line 6 and Fractal don't do. Again, Kemper don't do the real kind of modeling stuff. They've got the liquid profiles out. This kind of feels like a little vision of the future in some ways, having the amp capture and the amp modeling and an effect selection in there. I think is the way a lot of units are going to go in the future. The other thing worth mentioning as well is that this unit is being produced in a country that is currently in the middle of a war. This is being produced in Ukraine. And I think that is amazing that they are even able to get this out, and I have so much respect for them. So even though I have leveled a bunch of criticisms at this product, I just want to say again, I really, really like it. And with a little bit more development, I think it would be an absolutely amazing unit. I'd rather grab this than something like Tone X, and I reckon I'm going to dial this in with a bunch of my presets. And if you're a tweaker like I am and you just kind of dial things in and mostly just like to stomp on buttons at gigs, this will work really, really well. Now I want to hear your opinion in the comment section below. Did you like the tones in the video? Do you like this kind of idea going forward for a kind of hybrid capture device and modeler? Let me know in the comment section below. Again, thank you to Saint Rock for sending me one of these and letting me spend a bunch of time with it. I'll put a bunch of information about their website in the video description. This isn't a paid review and they aren't affiliate links down there. Go and check it out. Go and make some guitar noises and have some fun. And again, I thank you so much for checking out the video. Take it easy.